Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Time Travel. Now today, we're going to be going back to the year 1986 and talking a little bit about the Apple IIGS. And this was probably one of the most interesting Apple II models that Apple probably ever made. This was actually the second to last Apple II model. But even though that it wasn't the actual last one that they made, that one would be the Apple IIc Plus. This was the most powerful. I mean, this was the only Apple II computer featuring a true 16-bit microprocessor, while all the other models only had an 8-bit microprocessor. And it got its name GS because of its improved graphics and sound. But the first thing that I want to talk about is the different editions that this computer came in. I mean, this computer actually came in 3 separate editions. And the one that I have here is probably one of the more rarer editions. This is the special Wozniak edition, and this basically features a sort of Wozniak signature on the front. And it's not really like a signature, it's more of like an emblem, like it's not actually really signed by him. But it just says Woz, and then it says under that it says limited edition. And that's basically the only thing different from this and the more common model, which is just the standard Apple IIGS, and that just basically takes off this special Wozniak signature. And this special Wozniak signature was only printed on the first 50,000 units. So that basically means that this model I have here is one of the first 50,000 units of this computer that was ever produced. And yeah, there's not that much difference between those first two, except for that one Wozniak signature. But there is actually a third model that I don't really think a lot of people know about, and this is actually the Apple IIe upgrade kit. What you could actually do is take in your existing Apple IIe, and they would put in all the parts from the Apple II GS, and they would just kind of fit all of that into the Apple IIe case. And this wasn't really that popular, as it was kind of cheaper, but it didn't come with a mouse, and you couldn't actually use a lot of the Apple IIGS expansion cards with this model because they didn't actually fit in the case. So that was one of the reasons why people, that if they were just going to buy a new Apple IIGS, they were just going to go out and buy the whole new computer instead of just keeping their older Apple IIe. So that's basically the difference between the 3 Apple IIGS editions that they had. So now let's talk about a little bit about the hardware and sort of the design of this computer. So on the back here, we have a few ports, and these ports are for audio out, modem and printer. We have next to that a serial port. Next to that we have a floppy port, then an RGB video output port, and then we have a composite video out, and then we have the Apple desktop bus port. And this was actually the first Apple computer to feature Apple desktop bus, and a lot of people, one of the most common misconceptions is that a lot of people think that the Macintosh was the first computer to feature Apple desktop bus, but it was actually the Apple IIGS. It was the first. I think it was about a year or 2 years before the first Macintosh. But if you're not familiar with what ADB is basically a form of peripheral connectivity that Apple used to connect its keyboards and mice to its different computers from the time. So yeah, we have, I think, only one port for that, and then next to that we have the power port. And then above all of those ports, we have all of the Apple II expansion slots. And these would basically be used. I mean, these could fit the older Apple II cards and also the newer 16-bit GS expansion cards. They could all fit in this computer. Of course, I mean, if you had the Apple IIe upgrade kit, you could not fit most of the newer 16-bit cards mainly because of its size. So getting inside of this thing is actually pretty simple. There's just these 2 tabs on the back here. all we have to do is just push them in, and then the case just lifts off. And that's, you know, one of the great things about this computer, and probably every computer in the Apple II line, is that it is extremely simple to get inside of this thing. And that is probably one of the things that made it, you know, appeal to people, is that you could, I mean, this thing was easily upgradable, and it was, you know, easy to get like inside of it if you like ever like wanted to change out a part, or if like something was wrong with it or something like that. For the microprocessor, it featured a 16-bit microprocessor clocked at 2.8 megahertz, which allowed it to support not only the newer Apple IIGS software, but also all of the older Apple II 8-bit software. You know, it could you know, work simultaneously with both. And for video, it supports new high-resolution video modes, which allowed up to 640 by 200, and it selected colors from a palette of 4,096 colors. And for audio, this was actually the first computer ever to feature an Ensoniq digital oscillator chip. It was the first computer ever to do this. And this chip basically had its own RAM, and it supported 32 separate channels of sound, which, you know, that was you know, also pretty cool. And it also has 7 Apple II bus slots, which are those expansion slots that I was talking about earlier. And it also has an Apple IIGS memory expansion slot, which is, I mean, this model I have here, the previous owner actually put the expanded memory card in here, and it just basically allows you to add more RAM to the system, because, I mean, I think that was the only way you can add more RAM. And it's this, you know, huge card. Like, it's not just like, you know, one small stick of RAM like we have today. It's this big long card, and that's basically allowing you to add more RAM to the system. So another hardware feature that I just want to briefly mention is the keyboard that this computer came with. This is actually a pretty nice keyboard. It features this nice small compact design, and it's also, you know, works with ADB, you know, kind of appropriate, as this is the first Apple computer to use ADB. But yeah, it features this nice little compact design that actually removes the top row of the function keys, very similar to the original Macintosh keyboards. And it also feels really nice to type on, and it also sounds pretty nice too. Take a listen to it. So now let's talk about some of the manuals that I have for this computer. I believe I have all of the original manuals. I don't really think that I'm missing anything. But here is the Apple II, A Touch of Applesoft Basic manual. And this wouldn't just come with the Apple IIGS, but it would come with you know, any Apple II, even the older original Apple IIs, and it still has this registration card in it, which has one of their older addresses on it, and it's you know, actually in some pretty nice condition here. So that is that one. Here we have the Apple IIGS Memory Expansion Card Owner's Guide. Right here we have the Apple 5.25 Disk Drive Owner's Guide. You know, I mean, and this would, as you can see at the bottom here, it says Apple II, Apple II Plus, Apple IIe, and Apple IIc, and Apple IIGS. So this wouldn't just come with the 2GS. We also have the Apple 3.5 Drive Owner's Guide. And notice how the design of this manual looks a little bit different than the other ones. There's not any of those black bars at the top. And that's mainly because this drive was also sold as an accessory to the original Macintosh, and they wanted to make the manual design for all the manuals for that computer look very similar. So that's why this one looks different from, I think, all of the other manuals, is because it was actually marketed for another computer as well. And you'll see at the bottom here it says Apple IIGS and Macintosh. So those are the only two Apple computers at the time that it worked with. Here we have the Apple Color RGB Monitor Owner's Guide. This is the original monitor for the 2GS. Right here we have the Apple IIGS System Tools. which is just going to basically tell you about the Apple IIGS system tools. Here's the Apple Image Writer 2 Owner's Guide. Now, I actually have this. I just didn't bother to take it out of the attic because it was still up there. And it works with all Apple IIs and the Macintosh. And here is the Apple IIGS System Disk User's Guide, and this is what the user interface of GSOS looks like here. As you can see, it looks very similar to the Macintosh user interface, except it is in color. Pretty nice. And finally, we have the Apple IIGS Owner's Guide. It's very thick, as you can see here. I think it's like 500 pages or something like that. I didn't really count. And it is printed in the USA, which is also a pretty nice feature as well. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit about the software. So first I'm going to be showing you guys what actual floppy diskettes that I actually have for this computer. So the first floppy diskette that I have here is the Apple Presents AppleWorks. This is basically a guided demo of the AppleWorks software suite. And it would basically tell you all of the features of it. Here we have the Your Tour of the Apple IIGS floppy diskette, which would basically give you like a tour. Here we have the Apple IIGS System Disk, and this is for GSOS version 4.0, as you can see at the bottom there. And GSOS works very similar to the original Macintosh, as you would have to put it into the floppy drive and it would just boot up from there. I believe you could buy an external hard drive and install GSOS on there, so you don't have to put in that boot disk every single time. But that is one of the features for GSOS that is very similar to the original Macintosh. And here we have the Apple IIGS System Tools. I believe this is also a component of GSOS, because it also says version 4.0 down there at the bottom. And here we have some old school Apple II software that I actually still have. So first off, we have the old school Apple stickers in here, which is pretty cool. They've actually never been used before. Those are pretty cool to have. Apple, as I'm sure you all know today, still provides Apple stickers with all of its products, and it did that way back in 1986 with the Apple IIs, and it's one of those things that it still does today, which is pretty cool. And here we have the DOS 3.3 System Master Disk, and we also have the DOS 3.3 Basics Disk, and I believe these are copyrighted for the year 1980, so these are even older than the IIGS itself. And we also have Apple's old address on the back there. And these would obviously fit in the 5.25-inch floppy drive, which I have on screen here under the 3.5-inch floppy drive. And of course, both of these two types of software, both 8-bit and 16-bit, they both work on the Apple IIGS because of that 16-bit microprocessor. So one more little thing that I want to fit in here before that we actually boot up GSOS is I just want to talk briefly a little bit about ROM upgrades. And the reason why I actually want to mention this is because my Apple IIGS actually can't run GSOS. And the reason for that is because the internal ROM of the system has never been upgraded even to ROM 01, which was the first initial ROM upgrade that Apple issued. But basically, these ROM upgrades provided newer features and various improvements to the Apple IIGS, and they would be given to users for free, much like iOS updates are today. That's basically what this is. Instead of simply downloading a file, you would actually have to bring your entire computer into an authorized Apple dealer, and they would perform the ROM upgrade there. And this computer, I guess it's been sitting for like 25 years because it's never been upgraded to even ROM 01. And so it can't run even version 4.0 of GSOS, which needs ROM 01. So this has the original factory ROM and was never upgraded above that. So to actually boot up GSOS, we're going to have to be using an emulator, which I have loaded on my host computer, and we're just going to be doing that. So I'm going to be switching over to that right now. Alright, so here we are booted up into GSOS. Now again, I'm doing this on an emulator, so the speeds that you're going to see on this are probably going to be a little bit faster than you would on actual hardware. But yeah, this is it. This is what GSOS looks like. It is very, similar to the original Macintosh user interface, except for the big main thing is that it is in full color, which the original Macintosh only supported a black and white display. But the Apple IIGS was the first ever Apple computer to support a full color graphical user interface, and that's what we have here. But the basic functionality of this whole operating system is pretty much the same, if not very similar, to the operating system that is on the Macintosh. So let's just go up here to the Apple menu, and we'll go to About This Apple IIGS, and you'll see that this here looks again pretty similar to the Macintosh About screen. Now, unless you were talking about system software 1.0, that system software had a few differences. It didn't bring up this menu when you went into About This Macintosh, but in later versions, I think around System 5 and 6, it got this sort of info screen that would tell you what software version that you're running and the copyright dates and how much total memory and available memory that you have. And this is called System Software 6.0.1, which the Macintosh's operating system was also just called System Software up until I think Mac OS 7.5. I believe that was the first one to be called Mac OS, and then they just kept that name up until today. It's still called Mac OS 10, and it has a copyright date of 1983 to 1993, because this is not the original version of GSOS. This is of course the 6th version, so it was made around the 1993 time frame. So yeah, that's basically all that you have to see here, except for this actually pretty interesting logo. This drawing of the Apple IIGS actually follows the Macintosh sort of Picasso design scheme. That's kind of what they were going with the original Macintosh, and they have that same design scheme here, which is actually kind of interesting because the Apple IIGS was a whole separate product. So we can just get out of this here, and we'll see what other options we have in the Apple menu up here. We have this help option, which you can see it has the same keyboard shortcut commands. You can press the Apple command key and the question mark to bring up this menu, and this is just a basic Finder help application. And yes, this whole user interface was still it still contained the Finder. They didn't call the Finder anything else, which was something else that was again very similar to the original Macintosh, is that it still had the Finder. But this basically gives you some basic tips about doing things on the Apple IIGS, basically in this whole software. And so let's go to saving window positions, and it just tells you how you would save window positions. So it says when you close a window or drag a disk icon into the trash, the Finder creates a file on the disk that records the size and position of each affected window and the position and color of icons in each affected window. And it has things like this for each one of these different help topics in here, and that could be very useful if someone who didn't really know what they were doing when they were using this, because again, this was from the time when when graphical user interfaces were just starting to come to personal computers. This was again a few years after the original Macintosh's release, but I'm sure there were still people that didn't really know how to use a whole graphical user interface, and this program called again Finder Help was probably meant to help with that. So we'll just close out of that there, and we'll go back up here into the Apple menu, and you see we have a few other applications here. We have this calculator program, which is basically, as you can probably tell, a basic looking calculator that can perform basic math functions. It has basic 4-function math, and you can actually click on this button up here and you can get a few more options over here on the side. So we'll say 2 times 6 and we'll get 12. It also works with decimals, as I'm sure you would expect from a calculator, especially on a computer. So we can say 12 divided by 9 and we'll get 1.3 repeating. And so yeah, that's basically that. Not much to say about that. It's a basic looking calculator application. Under control panels though is where it gets a little bit more interesting. We can see that I believe this design, I know I've seen this somewhere. I think it was in the original Macintosh control panel. I'm not certain on that, but I know they had this same sort of interface somewhere. And I'm not really sure how you resize the window. I think you can go to preferences maybe. I know this is just going to give you the general Finder preferences here. So we'll just accept those. I don't really know how to resize the window. I haven't really used this operating system, so yeah, I don't really know how to do that. But anyway, so yeah, it's going to give you. It's basically like a launcher type application for all of your settings that you would want to manage on your computer. And you see down here it says version. I'm guessing that is the version number of this, which is 2.1. So we'll just go in here to where it says General and then click Open. And it's going to open up that control panel. So it got really slow there for some reason. And this is where we can change options such as how many times that the menu blinks, how fast that the cursor flashes, the general system speed, the mouse speed, and the double click speed. And we can change the monitor and the keyboard input settings. They're both by default set to the United States of America standard. And for the keyboard, that would be the QWERTY keyboard standard. But if you wanted to, you could change that. It's kind of funny how they don't have the name of the actual keyboard standard in here. But I guess that just makes it easier, as you would just pick where you live, and it would auto find what type of keyboard you were using, as I'm sure most people didn't really know the difference between QWERTY keyboard and something like an AZERTY keyboard or something like that. And we can change the translation method as well, and you can also alphabetize DAs, which I'm not actually really sure what that does. So we can just go out of that. That's basically what that does. I don't know why the system speed is getting slow all of a sudden. We have hierarchic, I think is how you pronounce that. And in here is, I guess, the delay, the drag delay and the initial delay of the window. So I'm guessing if we bring this up, it'll give us a little bit more of a delay when we drag the windows. If we bring it down, you'll see it goes a little bit, it like redraws the window a little bit faster. But if we bring this all the way up, you'll see it. Actually, I'm not really seeing that much of a difference there. Maybe initial delay. Yeah, maybe I think it's just because of the speed that this emulator runs at. We're not really seeing that much of a difference there. So yeah, that's that. Well, we'll just close that for now. Under media control, I believe this is going to give you all of your options for your different media cards and things like that. And you can choose, yeah, so this is going to allow you to select which media channel you want, and you can choose from your different media devices as well as your port. And you also have the option to clear that media channel as well. And this is again using that Insonic digital oscillator chip, which I believe it provided 8 separate channels of sound. So this is where you would be able to control all of that from here. So that's what that is. We'll just exit it again. Again, I apologize for the really slow system speed. I'm not really sure what is causing that. We have MIDI under here, which is something else to do with audio. I think if we open this up, we can choose which MIDI controller or which MIDI driver and what card slot it's in, and also how it connects either the printer or the modem port. Under the printer port, we can configure. I'm just going to open this up here. You can click on open, and this is again pretty self-explanatory. You can just configure options for your printer. You can choose let's say like you want to change the line length from unlimited to something like 132 lines. You can change that. We'll just set it back to unlimited, and you can also reset it back to standard settings. So if you mess something up in here and suddenly your printer doesn't start to work or doesn't work the way you would want it to, you could just go back to all the default settings, which is again very useful down there. So let's exit out of that, and we'll go down. Let's see here. What is next? We'll go down a little bit. So next is RAM. And you can also double click on these icons, by the way. It's the same thing as clicking these icons and then hitting open. You can do the same thing. So I believe this gives you options to set up your RAM disk, which that's how the operating system would work if it's booting off of a floppy drive. It would work, it would save the like basic stuff for the OS in the RAM, which is called a RAM disk. And that's basically how in the original Macintosh, for example, you would boot from the system disk, and then if you wanted to put in like a game or another application, you would take out the system disk while it's still running, and you would put in the other disk, and it would still be able to work properly. That's what the RAM disk is used for, and I guess you can configure those options here. It's set up to a 0K for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Again, that might be something to do with the emulator and everything. But we'll just, again, go out of that here. And you can choose under this set start option. This is actually choosing which default program will open when you boot up your computer. It's, of course, default set to the Finder, but if you wanted to make it boot up like an Office program or a game or something like that, you could change that here by going into Select Application. And you could choose from any application that was on your Apple IIGS, and that would basically allow you to do that from this menu here. So we'll just close that, and actually I think you have to hit on cancel. Okay, and you can also this box here it says show startup items. It when this system is booting up, it has a very similar sort of animation thing, just like Mac OS 9. Like if you've ever used Mac OS 9, you'll know there's when it boots up, I think by default there's like all of those icons going across the bottom of the screen, and it basically does the same thing here. While it's booting up, it shows all of the different programs that are loading. And you can also enable programmer CDAs, which is something to do, I guess, if you're programming your own application. And we can go in here to the slots, and this is where you can actually configure all of these slots that you are using here. Again, very simple user interface. You can just choose or just basically see what cards you have in each slot. Let's go to that here, and we'll go down. I think the last one we have is sound. You can configure all your sound options here as well, and we'll just open that up. Again, I'm not really sure why the emulator is being slow, but you can choose, or rather change the volume and the pitch, and give event. I think you can make a different sound. So now it's going to make a system beep, or maybe not. Sound standard beep. Okay, there it is. So that was the event system beep would make the sound standard beep. And if you want to go to, like, say, bad disk, it'll say sound not assigned, so you can assign like a different sound if you want. They actually have a few different sounds on here, so we'll say swish. So now if there's a bad disk, it'll play that sound. So that's basically what that does. So we'll just close out of that, and that's it for the control panels, or sort of the control panel launcher. And all we have up here is the media controller. So basically what this is it would allow you to control all of your different channels of sound, and you have all these options here, such as record, eject, stop, and you can change your audio settings and all that, like your volume, and you can play and pause and everything. And you can choose, and it's not going to work because I don't have anything connected to it. I don't really know how to connect it to this emulator, but that's basically what that does. So, and you can again choose from your 8 different channels. So we'll just close out of that, and the last thing we have in here is the video mix, which is basically a little application. It's not going to work. It says no card found, so I'm guessing it would have something to do with video. And that's basically all for the Apple menu up here. Under edit, I mean, these are just going to be like basic Finder options like cut, copy, and paste and things like that. You can actually shut down your computer from this special menu up here, which I'm not going to do now. I'm probably going to do that at the end. And I'll just show you what a Finder browser window looks like. Again, it looks very similar to the original Macintosh. Again, not really much difference here except it's in color. We can go into the system folder. It'll open up a new window just like it does on the Macintosh, and you can view. Okay, so there's how you resize windows. It wouldn't let me do that before for some reason. and you can view all your different applications and games and everything on here. And here's a bunch of GSOS files. And again, just like you would expect from even Macs today, it shows all of your like drives on here, which is something that actually they still do. You know, Apple still does that today. When you plug in like a USB drive or a external hard drive, it'll show up, like the icon will by default show up on the desktop. And that can be traced all the way back to the original Macintosh and again the Apple IIGS. So yeah, that's basically a brief tour of GSOS, and you know, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of Time Travel on the Apple IIGS. You know, of course, I mean, this was a very capable machine. It was just not really given that much attention, and that's why it was kind of discontinued just a couple years after that it was initially released, because Apple was constantly focusing on getting the Macintosh out to people. And it was actually continued just 6 years later, which wasn't really a long lifespan for this computer, but it did bring a lot of new things, you know, such as ADB and a color graphical user interface. And yeah, I mean, that's basically going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys enjoy this video and would like to see more videos like this, definitely be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to leave me a comment down below. Just, you know, tell me your thoughts on the Apple IIGS, and you know, if you think that it is a good computer, and you know, if you own one, or if you would like consider buying one, or you know, just anything like that. And of course, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.